This is the City Council workshop for June 18, 2025. City Clerk, would you do the roll call, please?
Councilmember Sell.
Here.
Councilmember Papalardo.
Here.
Councilmember Stevenson.
Here.
Mayor Chazet.
Here?
Vice Mayor Butlin.
Here. Okay. This evening, we have presentations on the City of DeBary 2045 Comprehensive Plan.
Good evening, Stephen Bapp, Growth Management Director. I will be giving tonight's presentation. Tonight is our fourth workshop in a series of workshops with the end goal of having a new and refreshed comprehensive plan, which is a requirement to refresh by Florida statute. As the fourth workshop, what we're going to do tonight is finish the Volume 1, which is the data and analysis, and dive a little bit into Volume 2, which are general provisions, the vision of the city, and property rights. Will not be a very verbose and detail focused presentation, but it's going to finish up the Volume 1 and start Volume 2. The first of the final analysis is the suitability and needs for development. As many know, the city does contain a significant amount of undeveloped land within its boundaries. And while we became a municipality in late 1993, the city physically existed for about 60 years prior to that. Due to the fact of it being in an unincorporated status, there are some development patterns we inherited that would probably not pass muster today. Our city, as many know, the bulk of the city's land was developed within a 2-mile radius of 1792 and the High Banks intersection. The areas south of Dirksen are still relatively undeveloped. And prior to incorporation, many of these lands were kept under an agricultural use or used for utility production, and that's many years prior to incorporation. Our original 1997 adopted comprehensive plan then designated some of these areas to be mixed use. However, they did remain undeveloped due to facts of some difficulty developing the property, such as wetlands, habitat areas, soils, floodplains, and the cost of development. 20 years after that plan, in about 2000, the early 2010s, there will be a renewed interest in the development of a mixed-use designated land. And what drove that? Just a little history, as many know. We opened the Sun Rail Station in 2014. That was probably the biggest catalyst we had in the southern region of our city. Also complicating or adding to our developmental pressure was the spilling over into the city of DeBary, primarily from south of the bridge and some of the Orange City, DeLand, Deltona area spilling into our city metropolitan boundaries. Also, the rapid popularity and transit-oriented design, meaning building density around our rail station, started to become of high interest. Much of our undeveloped land within the city is located in older areas as well. In our older platted areas, there are about 577 undeveloped infill lots. These lots do struggle with certain constraints, such as resource corridor, zoning, wetlands, uneven, difficult terrain to develop a home on. What we look at for our suitability for partial land is high soil hydraulic ratings, meaning you can construct on it without sinking. The low existence of a floodplain on a property, no existence or few existences of wetlands. Make sure there's no threatened or endangered species. Make sure there's no non-conforming lots. Make sure there's not something impeded by easements, such as the FPL power transmission lines. And also, what we look at for suitability is an established infrastructure, something you don't need to build a road to or have a very expensive extension of power or utility. We do know that infrastructure is necessary to serve both the existing developed areas and future development. Staff does consider that the city's existing infrastructure may or may not be adequate to remove some of the deficiencies we have in the city with some of our existing lots. What we look at, what would we need for any type of infrastructure improvements? Well, simply as I discussed before, roadway improvements, extension of water or sewer utilities, improvements to the stormwater system, development of new parks to support new development, and facilities for pedestrians and bicyclists, which is very important to the city. I think this map is pretty good. We looked at the 2024 tax rolls. There are a few of these properties which do now have a development order. But according to the 2024 tax rolls, we looked at the vacant land. And in green, we find suitable for development, meaning adequate infrastructure exists. There are not many wetlands or flood-prone areas on the parcels indicated. The yellow is potentially suitable, but the yellow may indicate there may be a zoning conflict, maybe split zoning, things of that nature, which would need to be resolved before a development order would be issued. And the red areas are unsuitable. You see the red areas around the Palm Road, which is on the right side of the slide, center of mass. That large area, which was bought by the city not too long ago. We do have some areas along 1792 in the south, and some in our northwest quadrant that would be unsuitable. We do have a definition. We'll outlay the definitions you see on the screen. We're going to outlay the definitions as we submit this article to the state for their review. To me, it's kind of common sense. Suitable means, yeah, you could probably go on there pretty quickly and develop. Potential, meaning there a longer time in the developmental process would be incurred. Then likely and suitable are probably ones realistically which would never be developed or highly unlikely to be developed. We looked at our projected population, and we have discussed this in earlier analysis. We feel that there will be, at the end of this period for DeBerry 45, there'll be just over 33,000 persons in the city. And we're looking maybe 2,831 new units by the end of 2024. We know that in the near future, and we are braced for this, DeBerry will be the location of significant amount of non-residential development or commercial and mixed-use development, which is not a bad thing because it does support and manage our growth. It supports the residents, supports things of that nature. Thus, we do need the need for non-residential development needs to be projected as well in our analysis. We looked at when we develop households. We do know that based on household size, we do have calculations that each median household would need for parking, and it does boil down to about 100 square feet of non-residential space per person per household unit that we need to consider in these analyses. Also needed to develop for the projected population, the total projected need for non-residential development, as we see it, is just over 283,000 square feet, which will primarily be met, number one, through the development of the TUD, and then the need for the non-residential development will continue to occur along 1792, infill development, new commercial development if people aggregate several of the smaller lots along 1792. We really do see we are postured well to meet the needs of the non-residential and residential development. That concludes really our analysis section of the comprehensive plan. The next step for us is to look at the goals, objectives, and policies, which is called Volume 2. What we learned from our analysis will be applied to adjust any goals, objectives, and policies for the future development of the city. What this is called is Volume 2, as I stated, and the first thing we look at are general provisions. It's more or less the introduction to the goals themselves. The general provisions of this part of the comprehensive plan primarily relates to what we found in Volume 1 and then provides things such as our vision for the city to guide our goals, objectives, and policies. And speaking of vision, staff did look at our vision, our current vision. Staff finds it suitable, and I think personally it's a very well-written vision statement. If there are any contributions to this, I do entertain any member of the council to provide comment. I mean, you can take this home, look at it, reflect on it, but I think it really is pretty inclusive of where we see the city going. And I know this vision statement had been worked pretty hard in the 2012 edition of our DeBary Comprehensive Plan. Another element which is included in Volume 2 in the introductory part are the property rights element. This is a relatively new element that's required by Florida statute. I believe it came in about 5 years ago. We already have it in our comprehensive plan, so we've met the legislative intent of having this. But it basically states if you own property, you have the right to develop the property within the means of local laws and ordinances. I call it common sense, but for some reason the legislators found it more important that we do tell people that they can build on their property if they meet all the laws of the land. But it is a requirement. We will include it. Then also we are required to include this very verbose paragraph, which is the effects of the element. Which does support what's outlaid in our state statutes, also outlaid in our state constitution, and also has been determined by the Supreme Court of the United States about the ability for cities to make zoning decisions, and also about the ability for persons to develop their property. That's really it for tonight. Just wanted to bring those two items out. So our next items that we'll focus on are really kind of the meat and potatoes of our comprehensive plan, the goals, objectives, and policies, how we want to shape our vision, and how we want to drive our goals to meet our vision, and how we're going to reflect and adjust those goals, which we've already established to meet current law, or maybe some changes in what I call the human operating environment. So we're going to look at something that's pretty near and dear to many of us, which is the future land use element, and also the housing element. Those will be the next two elements on the docket. I anticipate early September this being concluded, the writing of the new proposed comprehensive plan, probably with the first reading, adoption, the transmittal hearing. It'll go to the state for 30 days or so. Then I anticipate probably the last one in October, realistically, really maybe the first meeting in November, having our second reading to adopt the comprehensive plan, the new goals and policies which we've established. So that really concludes my presentation for the workshop. I'd like to hear any questions anyone may have.
Thank you. City Clerk, do we have any public participation?
No, ma'am, we do not.
Councilmember Sell, questions or comments?
None at this time.
Councilmember Papalardo?
No comments.
Councilmember Stevenson?
Can we go back to the distribution map, the development suitability map? And I'm seeing a lot of areas that I recognize possibly as parks and conservation, and why those wouldn't be marked, or utilities.
Well, if it's a parcel that's kind of spoken for,
That's why it would be blank on there?
yeah, yep, exactly.
Okay. And then up here on East High Banks Road, that's all yellow. That already had a development plan on it.
Yes, it does, but the pre-plat is not yet approved. It has a development plan. I would say by adoption, that may just go away, that color.
would
by the time we bring it up to adoption, but this is based on the 2024 property tax rolls. And Mr. Barker and I did identify that, and we'll probably take that off the map.
Okay.
It's called High Banks Townhomes.
But I remember that.
As a matter of fact, we have another, they did their second submittal on their pre-plat, and we're having a discussion meeting with the new owner.
I was also curious, looking down,
Yep.
And
And
this-
also, there's a few up there that have a recently refreshed PUD, but they haven't gone through the pre-plat process and have a development order to turn dirt.
and in the southeast corner down here, just beyond kind of the TOD area, you've got green and then you've got some conservation land. Is Buckley down there as far as part of a development suitability judgment on the map?
We don't have that as a potentially developed because it is owned by a public entity at this time.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Vice Mayor Butlin?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, sticking with this map, I go down Fort Florida and I see a spot just right to the fort and the F in Fort. Is that our property? Or is that next to our property? Is that,
Oh, let me look at my map. I'll look at my map so I can find the F in Fort.
it's just to the right of the F in Fort? It's the only little yellow thing on Fort Florida there when you're first, right there, yep.
That would be our fire station, I think.
But it's under yellow, that's why I'm questioning
No,
potentially.
I believe that's the 5 acres to the west of our fire station. There's a
Okay.
parcel between there.
Yeah,
and
it's
that
owned
home
by,
that's
it's owned by
Okay.
That's
the
right.
daughter and son-in-law of the neighbor on the other side.
On the other side.
Yes.
So-
Potential issues.
That has issues, okay. I just want to make sure it wasn't ours, and it looks weird on the map that we don't see.
Severe drop-off, and there's a lot of wet area.
There's some wetlands on the property, but they could be
Mitigated?
mitigated.
Okay.
Well, and it's 5 acres.
Yep.
So depending what you put, that's a lot of space to work
To
around
work around.
things.
Okay, I just want to make sure that wasn't ours. I'm okay with everything else. I agree with Patricia. I'm concerned with a lot of the reds, but, and some of the yellows. But that's the only thing I really had a concern. Everything else on the thing was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll get that out when we review it.
I have a question also about a yellow space, just to understand what it is. And it looks like it is near Riviera Bella 6-7, down to the river. I thought that that was conservation land and can't be built on. You got an Indian Midden there.
I see what you're saying. I'll look more into that.
Okay?
I mean, we look.
Because the Riviera Bella does have, Rosabella View has a cul-de-sac there, and there are lots that could still be, they're platted, they could be built, but the last 150 feet or whatever to the river is conservation.
Yes, it is.
And so I don't see that as yellow. Conservation land to me with an Indian Midden in the middle of it,
Yeah, right.
that should be red.
Okay. So noted. We got it.
Okay.
I know the parcel you're talking about.
And Steve, I have one more input there. On St. John's Woods there, the very west parcels that are lined up there against the Costa property, where they're against those wetlands, and most of those parcels are wet.
Yeah, yes, they are.
Can you reevaluate that yellow, make sure that that probably shouldn't be red? Because they're all pretty much in the
Right.
wetlands along there.
Okay, we'll relook at that. I know what you're talking about, but
Right, and
that'll be an issue to do.
Because there's a paper city road that's there, and there's parcels there that are, where the houses are developed. I can't remember the name of that road.
it's not Afton. Afton,
Not Keeble?
it's Keeble. It's
But there's
Keeble.
another road after Keeble.
Oh, yeah.
and
It's
there's lot-
between
and there's lots of
Keeble
them there.
and, it's between Keeble and that, and a couple of those parcels sold in the last year, they were tax sale parcels.
Yeah.
But they're very, very wet.
Yeah. So I'm
And
not
they
sure.
don't have a
Very wet
built
and
road.
Probably won't have a road built.
They don't have a road, they were sold at tax auction, probably because the hurdles for doing anything with them are extremely high.
And they may be red.
Red is what I think they would be.
More than likely. We'll look at that.
Okay.
I agree. I know what
All
you're
right.
talking about.
Okay. I have no further questions or comments? Anything further from the council or the city manager?
Nope.
Hearing no additional, we stand adjourned.